My name is Christian Altizer, and this is my presentation on the city of Ur. This is for my history class 406, which is archaeology of the ancient Near East. So, the city of Ur was located in southern Mesopotamia. This map to the left gives you a relative location of where it would be in nowadays terms. As you can see, you got the Red Sea, Mediterranean Sea, Persian Gulf, and Caspian Sea. Nowadays, Iraq is where Ur was located. The Euphrates and Tigris rivers are the big locative places of these because between those two is what was called kind of Mesopotamia. That is where it was believed that the Garden of Eden was and where creation of humankind kind of happened due to the fact that populations seem to expand from there and that those places are the only places that you could really live in due to it being a large desert kind of anywhere but near those rivers. So the site of the city of Ur was obviously a major city when they first found it. It was located in the region of where Sumer used to be. It was a culture and commerce powerhouse of its time due to being a port city right next to the Persian Gulf. Now, this city was around for about 3,400 years, about 3,800 BC to about 450 BC. That gave the city a long time to kind of develop and become a large place for trade and commerce. They know it was big on trade and commerce, not only because of all the ports and water availability that it had, but because when they excavated it, they found plenty of stuff from places that were not right near the site of Ur, including things such as pottery and money from different parts of the world that were at the time not really places you would go unless you were seeking trade. So the archaeologists that first found the place was a man named Pietro della Val, and when he first found it, he didn't really excavate it all. He kind of just found bricks and stuff of that nature that had cuneiform on them. He just wrote it down as they were strange symbols on the brick because he didn't quite know what cuneiform was at the time. The first time this area was excavated was in 1853 by a man named John George Taylor. He also didn't get into as deep as he probably should have as being the first excavator on the site, as he didn't quite understand what he was digging up. He understood that it was eventually probably a large city, but he didn't quite know how large, when it was from, or who inhabited it. The man known for the main excavation of the site was Sir Leonard Woolley. This site became famous in 1922 while he was excavating and began to find such things. And when he went a little deeper than the last guy and began to find the things that made this site really important and held historical value, that allowed him to locate it and kind of understand where he was, what he was finding, and how important it was. So the remains that can be found on the site were in two main grave sites. There was the Great Death Pit, and then there was the Royal Tombs. So the Great Death Pit is very similar to something like the catacombs. It was like a giant maze. This was kind of as a way to be able to store more bodies because, as I mentioned earlier, the city of Ur was a very large city, a very prosperous city that was there for a long time. So they needed a lot of places to bury people. And building a maze like that in that section kind of allows you to fit more bodies in a smaller space compared to if you make a tomb or a grave for every single person. Now, the royal tombs will be talked a little bit more now later, but it basically held the royalty and their servants and slaves. So, one of the important structures, possibly the most important structure of the city of Ur, was the ziggurat. This building was a giant temple, essentially. It was for worship of multiple gods, but the main god it was made to was the moon god Nana. Now, I don't know a whole lot on the theology of the Sumerians, but I know they did tend to have multiple gods. They weren't monotheistic. So there was also probably more temples in other towns or in this town that were not to this specific god. This temple, however, was very well preserved and one is the is one of the best examples of like large Sumerian architecture, as we don't find it very well preserved all the time due to like the sand and stuff and its nature to tear down buildings as time progresses. The royal tombs is like one of the other major finds for the city of Ur, and this is because it kind of teaches us a lot about the time and what was going on. A lot was buried within the royal tombs, such as like the bodies of the royal family, artifacts within them, and then like some written histories. So within the royal tombs, you could find the bodies of not only the royal temples but soldiers, oxen, and slaves, because it was believed that they would pass with them into the afterlife. So as you can see in this picture down on the bottom, there's the 5 or 6 soldiers up in the front. There was a lot more than them buried within the whole total of the tomb. There's the oxen. There was oxen in pretty much all of the graves, and then there's 2 carts, and then there's people lined up. Those are basically all the servants of this king before he died, and they would actually be buried with him as a way to pass them on to the next life. And then they were all buried with clothes per se. Some of them being like fancy golden headdresses and stuff of that nature. And then a few of the royal families were buried with like written accomplishments of what they did with their life, and that's how we can actually get a history of what happened during their lives. So the Bible aspect of the city of Ur, it was mentioned a few times in the New Testament as the burial place of, not the burial place, the birthplace of Abraham, and as well as in the Old Testament. There is arguments that it means the city of Ur, which was actually a little farther north, and that would put Abraham's birth point at a different time, but most people agree that it was the city of Ur. Thank you for your time. That was my presentation on the city of Ur.